Here. Anthony will join me in a second. I'm just relaxing, taking in the feel of it, and realizing that there's been quite a bit of furry shows coming on anime recently. And I'll get Anthony to talk about it. I do want to shout out to Brian Niemeyer for his book, Don't Give Money to People Who Hate You. Fantastic reminder that your time is money. I'm putting a... No, it's too loud. Too long. There we go. I suggest you check it out. It's pretty good. It's more about what is this? All right, no, we're good. It's more about basically the how do I want to put it? It's basically saying don't give money to the propagandists. It's an important statement, right? Like people want to be entertained, they want love and romance and video and stuff like that, but oftentimes they're not really willing to suffer for it, which is kind of bad, um, because it means that they're not really willing to they're not really willing to sacrifice for things that would actually benefit them in the long run. Like it's just one of those things. If they're not willing to sacrifice, then honestly, it's just gonna keep on going. It's just gonna keep on more suffering, um, more bad choices, more things that nobody really wants to see, more um, dreck, honestly. Pulp Rev is absolutely fantastic. It's really just kind of the best of the best for a lot of this stuff, and it's if people don't support them, if they don't support these sort of things, if we don't stop supporting creators who honestly hate their people, hate their viewers, hate their readers, they'll do it. Like my problem, and I have a big problem. My problem isn't like skill in writing. Like I could always write better. I could, like that's an infinite ceiling. At no point will the ceiling not be way above my head. But I still need to make sure that I'm respecting, my viewers, my readers, my my everything, right? The if I'm not respecting them, I'm not doing my job as an entertainer. Now, I might have delusions of grandeur, but that doesn't mean that, I need to be some sort of snoot who's sitting in an ivory tower. Just because I like, my meat well spiced doesn't mean I'm against a tavern. And I'm always kind of scared that comes out, that I set myself up differently than I actually do. Um, One of the things that I do kind of like about Japan is that the best shows that they put out usually are pretty respectful of their audience. And that might be a sort of like strange thing to say, because it's like, oh, what do you mean by respectful? Uh, it's like they don't like um, insult their audience, right? Like sometimes they'll make fun of an otaku or whatever because it's a cheap shot, but that's different than like trying to destroy Japanese culture, trying to destroy everything that kind of makes Japanese culture more than reasonable. Um, they're having their own issues. Enough as it is, I've made it clear in streams and videos that Japan's suffering demographic decline. There's more old people than young people, and you never, outside of a war, you never want to be in that position, because that means that honestly, it's Honestly, it's heartbreaking for a lot of these countries. Like they've hit like peak capitalism in all the worst ways. So their women have become frigid, their men have become strange. You know, they lack chests, and their women lack chests too. And you know, they kind of sort of seem to be not falling apart at the seams because they're mostly a homogenous culture, but they don't have that spirit of the samurai. You know, they'd rather work themselves to death than live lives of meanings. There was a guy in Mishima who was like a sort of almost modern day samurai, very militant, sort of all over the place by any modern definition, right wing, left wing, etc. Um, but he wanted a return to like Japanese masculinity, Japanese chauvinism, I guess I'll say. Um, Basically, if he had gotten his way, if his coup had succeeded, he would have had a great time. It would have really worked out for him. But sadly, no, he failed. They refused to give in to any of his demands, and he committed seppuku with his um, first student, committing suicide. And I think like 3 or 4 of his students committed suicide through seppuku at the end of his coup. I think he took over like a police station or something. I can't really remember. So what comes out of a culture that has high productivity by nature, and then um, sort of hits decline, like an 18-wheeler smashing into them, is that they start producing degeneracy at an absolute astounding rate, an absolute insane rate. Um, I'm no real prude here, but it's kind of wacky, the things that come out there. You reach out and it's like, behold, this internet archive has millions of images. They are all not safe for work. What? So, like, you have entire industries come up with this. I think so. So, if I'm thinking about like lines of degeneracy cultures, I'm really not sure. Like, uh, like, there was a beginning to it, and I think it came out of the crash in the 90s. Like, Japan has always been weird, and it's always been weird about their fetishes. But after the lost decade, after their crash in the 90s and their crash and burn and stuff like that, and societal almost collapse, it was a crisis, certainly. It kind of ripped something out of them. And unlike other crises, their kids didn't become stronger for it. So I'd say that my generational cohort equivalent in Japan is something of a lost generation for them. Anyway, it's like no matter how hard you work, you just can't seem to, you know, like you can. A lot of people make something of themselves, but sometimes you just can't seem to get that drive, that engine going. And a lot of these people we see, they they start developing strange things, dolls and robots and stuff like that. And it's 100 years before robots are going to be any good, but it's still being pursued over life and red bloodedness and things that create satisfaction in people that I've seen it in. Most of the time, it seems that they do it for its own sake, to fill these holes and gaps in themselves that should never have been there, and any other generation wouldn't have been there. Even in crisis generations, people still get married, have kids, produce life and so on. And honestly, even some of the worst catastrophes aren't as uncomfortable as as sometimes it's made out to be. Sure, if somebody's in like England, sure, it was kind of uncomfortable during the 30, no, sorry, the English Civil War and the War of the Roses and so on and so forth. It was kind of uncomfortable during Stephen and Matilda's dust up. But even then, once the peace of God set in after the Tudors took over, you know, the only time you're ever really uncomfortable is if you're on the Scottish border, or if you're a non-Anglican Protestant. Everyone else was actually quite comfortable, and the vast majority were, untouched by whatever went on with these things. Like it's, hmm, like it's all these different potential stuff that never came about to anything more than a blip on the radar, historical significance. Um, the common man fought and died as they do in the armies, but you know, like casualties were rarely like 100%. Like honestly, when you see like 1 out of every 10 people die, an army with medium to bad morale is just gonna rout if they even got the gumption up to fight at all. Um, it's it's strange to see it. It's strange to live in these times. Like it's like you look you look at all these things happening, and you look at the comparisons to the art of the yesteryear, like JoJo Part Adventures Part One or something like that, and the art and development and sort of spirit in it. Then you compare it to the now, even in JoJo's, it's a different thing. I don't think their ancestors would be happy with them. They do worship their ancestors. And it's like they work themselves up to a point where they don't care, they don't believe it'll affect them. But it's like, what does that do to a soul of a nation if they don't turn Christian like the pagans did in Europe, or if they don't develop themselves and their spirit beyond beyond this sort of baseline, it sort of leads them deeper and deeper in. The reason why I say sort of like menacing vibrations from the furry community is that recently there's been some shows, and I'm going to talk more about Anthony to this. Recently there have been some shows that are basically like furry bait, and that's BNA, Brand New Animal, and Beastars, and there's a few other ones, but honestly, I don't care. Um, and it's like furries are kind of like a Western degeneracy. They don't show up really um, in other cultures as far as I've seen. They kind of just sort of like exist. It's kind of like how certain drugs kind of take over in certain areas. Like meth is a big Midwest Missouri thing, but it's not really the same elsewhere. Like it's made here. It's not. Hmm, how do I want to put this? It's not everywhere all at once. Um, then we have what was I don't know. It's hard to explain it. Like there's cultural things that go on. Like New Yorkers, like New York executives pay for the good crack cocaine, but meth is kind of the poor man's drug. There we go. That's a good way to put it. Uh and it's kind of disheartening to see this stuff because it means that the degeneracy has continued on, has evolved. You know, but the game hasn't changed. It's kind of like how the pride parades um, are. If you ever watch one, I don't recommend it. Um, you'll see sort of like the evolution of what they say versus what they are, and it can be unsettling if you're not somebody who's willing to look at this sort of thing. Uh, it honestly can, cause all sorts of issues with what's going on, because it means that you either have to face the reality that is, or can say, look at the burning building, be sitting in it like the dog, and going, hey, this is fine. I even got that meme somewhere, I'm sure. But it's I always wonder about these people, because like living in this, seeing what I've been seeing, and existing in what I've been existing in, it's it's like it's like the Romans. Like there was this guy talking about the Romans, and he was like complaining about everyone because it was some sort of crisis, and he goes, times are hard, there's starvation riots in the streets, and everyone is writing a book, except they're not like writing like fun books about fun books about like Star Wars or whatever, Star Wars rip-offs. They're writing like books about, yes, this is my life, behold how dramatic it is. I had an argument on the forum with a supporter of the Green faction. I stabbed him, and it's like, excuse me. And it's like, it's just that forever, I assume, like from the Roman perspective. Behold, I will have vengeance against this interloper who is barely a full Roman. His mother was a Gallic slave, so on and so forth. This is how I assume that the Romans were petty. Like, the way they take vengeance when they're slighted, they must have been petty. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Since they're willing to murder at the drop of a hat, like I just assume. Mm. Roman pettiness. Yep. It may sound weird to everyone, but like some dude was like denied something in the Senate, and then he spent a year marching back to Rome, just to make them surrender. And it's like, why'd you do that? Well, they slighted me. Oh. He kept up that angry energy, on a 1 year march from the top of Britain to Gaul. I mean, to Italy. It's like, okay, dude. I love that energy. Honestly, it's something that we could be learning for ourselves, just because it's like, do we have that energy? If somebody slighted me, would I stay angry at them forever? I barely remember what I did yesterday. Like, would I just stay angry at the sky while I exert myself for 6 months to walk across an empire? I don't know. I don't think so. And it's like, like I don't know. Were the Romans into furries? They were degenerate. They had a, I don't know, maybe, probably. I wouldn't put it past them. Like someone dressing up like Romulus or Remus's wolf mother, and it's like, oh, ugh, ugh. Ugh. Fortunately for us, the entertainment's choice, much like I assumed the gladiatorial games were choice in ancient Rome, are. Excuse me. I've been up since 5 a.m. and it's 6 p.m. I don't like it. Uh, I still have to write things too. Anyway, what was I saying? So, like, we have our shows. We have connections to the internet. We have a connection, like, to all knowledge that's ever been in existence. Um, and we use it to make shows about anthropomorphic animals. You know, like we have the ability to write and create art, and a lot of people do. Like, I showcase art on this stream, on this channel, all the time, just all the time. Like, look at this, there it is. This is some cosplayer. Do I know her name? No, no, not really. But it's like the amount of effort that was put into this is itself skill. It is artistry. It is aesthetics, which can absolutely run rule. Uh, the I shouldn't look at myself in the stream like messing around with the images. It distracts me. It can absolutely rule the mind and the body, and this sort of existence where you pursue art for its own sake, art to sell, art to entertain. Um, and somebody somewhere probably likes what you're selling. Hopefully. I assume that those guys on DeviantArt who's super scared that someone will steal their image. This image is mine. Do not steal. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. Image is mine. Do not steal. Protected by law. All the classic stuffs, and it's just some crappy Sonic OC. And it's like, oh no. And the Sonic fans are streaming it themselves. Like, the depths of level that those poor beaten sods have been gone, is um certainly something.
Testing, testing.
Oh my goodness. Anthony, I'm streaming. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. All I said was testing, Ben. It's not that bad.
Okay.
We'll be fine.
Anthony, no. Alright. Anthony, how was your dinner?
Was pretty good. I was going to hot dog, and then my mom said, we made meatballs. So, got done a little bit faster than I would have otherwise.
Absolutely fascinating. So I'm
It
sort of
is. Hey, you asked me.
I
Don't.
did.
And you're watching a great boxing match. All right, what were you saying?
Alright, so I'm talking about, like, sort of the degeneracy of cultures. I talked about how Japan's more or less has been in crisis since their economy collapsed in the 90s. I then talked about going through degeneracy and various things. And then I got to talking about how Sonic is a class in and of itself, and how and whether or not the Romans were furries.
That's an interesting one. I haven't heard that claim, so I'd like to see you support it.
You see, I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking about it. You see, I know that they were like, it's one of those things. I'm sitting in my armchair like Mycroft Holmes, and Sonic fans had a CVWX says Sonic fans had an okay movie. They are empowered for another 10 plus years. You're absolutely right. The eternal cycle is something vaguely good comes out for Sonic. Sonic fans become hopeful. Or rather, the first teaser images. They become hopeful. Their hope is abused. And either their hope is vindicated or they are abused some more. And then the cycle begins again. Forever and ever. But I'm sure that the furry community is mostly made up of Sonic fans.
That sounds plausible. Do you watch Super Eye Patch Wolf at all?
I did. I watched his video before he had to put the truncated one that removed all
Yes, so
instances
did I.
of naughty pics. Though the Sonic OC in various poses of décolletage, um, dishabille. Sorry, I meant to say dishabille, not décolletage. Dishabille is certainly a study into the deepest, darkest psychologies of man. I one time was playing against I play a card game called Cardfight Vanguard against a psychologist who said, and we were talking about random internet stuff, and I said, "Oh, you ever deal with any furries?" Yes, and dragon furries are the worst. And I started laughing. And he's like, "Why?" He's like, "They don't bathe and they're full of themselves."
That's so specific. I
Right,
love it, actually. I kind of love that.
right, and
Just because of how specific. Eye Patch Wolf. I think Eye Patch Wolf is not bad. Digibro actually, I think he said something. He might have been talking about him specifically, maybe not. But he said he thought that a lot of YouTubers had a problem with taking way too long to get to the point, and that could describe Eye Patch Wolf perfectly. Uh,
See, I don't know. I view Eye Patch Wolf as an experience. You sit down, you get a drink, maybe turn on a video game, and you listen to whatever he's having to say. You know what I mean?
he does have a melodious voice. I'll give him that.
He does. But
Uh, I
hmm
do think though he's not based enough.
oh
If
no,
that, I, he's definitely not based enough. He's a little bit, not horribly, not bad enough, I think, for to be worth a boycott or anything, but he definitely is a little bit drenched or a little bit affected by the SJW culture. You
hmm
could see it a little bit in the Sonic video when he tries to justify the degeneracy of the Sonic community. Yeah, and that was kind of awkward. But at the same time, he's not like horrendous about it. You know, that's I've mentioned to you Chibi reviews, who I know you don't like his style at all, and I don't think he's a great analyst, but I have been pushing him because he is literally the only Anituber, major Anituber that I know of who backed Vic Mignonia,
Chibi
and he
reviews.
deserves credit for that. Chibi reviews.
Ah, I'll have to revisit his stuff because I don't remember it at all.
He's the one. He's the one who does like a daily update on every anime and manga going, and it's just kind of an off-the-cuff diary, video diary, basically. And
It is
he's
that
not all that
time
insightful
once
or
again.
anything, but he's super like you could just see when you look at him, he is super likable, and he's literally the only Anituber I know of who backed Vic Mignonia, which
Yeah.
is impressive. He also got, I believe he's the guy who got like hashtag support Horikoshi trending after the SJWs turned on Horikoshi. And Chibi Reviews was the guy who got like the response hashtag trending,
Is that
which is
was that
pretty impressive.
Horikoshi? Was that My Hero Academia?
Yes, yeah, My Hero Academia Horikoshi.
Right, because of Rabbit Girl's costume design or something.
I don't think that one was it. It was look. First off, every single My Hero Academia quote unquote controversy I have seen is abominably stupid. Uh, so it doesn't really matter which one it was, because whatever it was, he was absolutely right to oppose it, since none of them were smart. But there was some sort of backlash against him at the time. And Chibi Reviews actually got like support Horikoshi trending. And what's impressive about him is he is probably the single most apolitical reviewer out there. Like, he does not bring up current politics at all, not even to reference them. You know, other people like, oh, it matches the current climate or whatever. He doesn't even bother with that, but he still goes out and does things like back Mignonia. It gives it a little bit of legitimacy.
Yeah. You see,
He's not a great analyst, though. He really isn't. But he's a super likable, which is kind of why it's kind of fun to watch him sometimes. But
mm,
plus, he puts out tons of content, which is genuinely, non-sarcastically laud-worthy.
oh yeah,
You know, he does the work.
and that's like that's something that I personally look out for a lot of sort of YouTubers. Like the reason, even though you know Super Eye Patch Wolf kind of does sometimes not have the based opinion as much as you want. Like the amount of work that goes into each and every one of his videos is 10 out of 10. Same with Alexander. Um, you
That's
know,
true.
it's pretty you know good of them to do it like that, just because just because it sort of refreshes the mind. If there's a high quality piece of art, it will, um, do things for you. Even if it's strange, you know what I mean. Art has that power, which is why degeneracy in art is such a major issue. Um,
Yes.
I said, the title of this stream is menacing vibrations from the furry community. As I really should, honestly, if
What a title, though.
I know, right? I feel this.
A plus on the title.
I should have like done a thing where like it's a picture of a furry, set it to purple and neon and stuff like that with the caption "We are getting stronger," as the image header. Because honestly, like I've been kicking around the bush, but we might as well just strike at it. It's like I'm pretty sure, like we're seeing a spike of like animal person related shows, just because there's money in it and
Yeah,
furries.
that's true. There were three in a row.
Yep,
Zootopia, which was not good. Beastars, which was great, and Brand New Animal, which was really, really good and close to great. But that is true. They had three in a row. Kind of strange.
yep, and it's like so. I'm pulling out. Then there's things like Gleipnir, which is literally about a person going on a fursuit and murdering other people. Over coins. Got to collect them all. Collect them all, guys. You get a wish. And it's like other.
I'm enjoying Gleipnir.
I
It's
am
it's
too.
an interesting show.
Manga is like it's one of those things. Usually, I'm pretty uh apathetic towards whether a manga or thing is better. Like Dorohedoro is just, the manga is always going to be better than the anime of Dorohedoro just because the art is an absolute masterpiece in every single image. Even the gag ones. So it's like, you just kind of do it. Well, Gleipnir is just kind of, you really should read the manga sometime. Someday. But
The
yeah.
We were discussing that with Ken earlier, mangas and anime that are better than the manga. I know most of the time what you're going to get is people just want to see it animated, and then it's either a terrible adaptation or a satisfying one.
Mhm.
Dr. Stone is a good example of that, where the fans seem to be, they all admit that the manga is better. They're pretty clear about that, but they also seem to be very satisfied with the anime because it gives you what you asked for. You want to see Doctor Stone animated? Here it is. And then on the opposite end of it, you get Mob Psycho and Demon Slayer, where it takes already a really good manga and turns them into works of art.
Mhm.
So the anime of Demon Slayer, like when I say the anime is better than the manga, which I have been following and which is pretty much over now,
Yep.
uh, the anime is better than the manga, but that is an incredibly high compliment because the manga is excellent. It's just that the production values of the anime are so insane, it's pretty much impossible for the manga to be better.
What,
Uh,
what was the studio for
Mob
that one?
Psych, that was Ufotable.
Yep. Ufotable just has that high tier though. It's whew, so fine. Like that's so like here's something that Raftalia and Shiro here, everyone's favorite. Yeah, that's right, Raftalia. Oh, ew.
Yeah,
What's wrong? What's wrong, Anthony? You
yeah.
don't like the slave daughter lover thing that they got going
I,
on in
I
that
did,
world? Have you thought too
nah,
hard
I'm
about
being
it?
a little, I'm being a little trolly. I just don't like Shield Hero at all.
Neither do I.
But look, to be fair about Raftalia though, I guess she's the best part of the show, probably, but at the same time, you're right. Their relationship is extremely messed up. And as is the point of this stream, I don't think it's something that's worth being brushed out of the way because that's exactly what we're discussing right now.
Yep.
The relationship, this is really, really why, if you want to get down to it, I really hate most isekai.
The wish
They
fulfillment.
are Yes. But the wish fulfillment, it's not just wish fulfillment, it's a specific type of wish fulfillment for people who have really dirty minds and
Yeah.
in a disgusting, like, degenerate
Well, it's
minds.
the gamma. It's the
Shonen is
gamma thing.
also wish fulfillment. Yeah, shonen is also wish fulfillment in at least some of them, but shonen is very healthy wish fulfillment. I mean, Jotaro Kujo is undoubtedly a wish fulfillment character in some sense, but on the other hand, you should want to be like Jotaro Kujo.
Absolutely.
You know, not
Like,
in the sense maybe you don't want to be an asshole, but you do want to be somebody who is strong enough to be a hero and protect people and whatever. And Jotaro has healthy relationships, Sure, he has to grow into them and he has this abrasive personality, but he's a genuine role model. That's why Shonen, even now, even with the Isekai boom, Shonen is basically keeping anime afloat.
Sword Trash Online is epic art. See, here's the thing, like, with Sword Art Online, I keep flitting around with various ideas about it. Like, it's trash at the fundamental level, but it kickstarted, like, so people can say, like, Escaflowne existed beforehand, Digimon, hold on, Digimon existed beforehand. Yes, you're absolutely right that those are otherworld shows. They would fit retroactively the definition of isekai. But isekai did not exist as it does now before Sword Art Online.
The Isekai boom. How
Right.
about that? Sword Art Online caused the modern isekai boom. Even Sword Art was very similar to, I think, Dot Hack that
Yeah.
came before it, which, from what I know of it, most people think is somehow even worse.
Like, see, I don't know about
Not that
worse.
I will never try it anyway. So this,
I
who
tried it. I
cares?
got
But
bored with it. But a long
I
time
did
ago.
like. You want to talk about degeneracy? I actually genuinely, and I think it's worth talking about. And I did an article on it for Superversive Sci-Fi. No Game, No Life.
Oh yeah, I love that show. Absolutely, it's one of my favorite
No
shows of
Game,
all
No
time.
Life is a very interesting. It's a very interesting example, though, and I think what makes it such an interesting example is that it is so openly a comedy, and that Sora
Mm-hmm.
and Shiro are so openly portrayed as like genuinely disgusting people. Nothing about the relationship between Sora and Shiro is presented as healthy. It's
Right.
presented as extremely weird. And the same thing, like the constant mistreatment of Steph, depending on the mileage may vary how you take it, whether you like that aspect of it or not. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, even the constant mistreatment of Steph, like, it's funny because it's out of, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the word. It's
It
out of proportion,
right.
which is what makes it funny.
Like if
You know that.
right. Like Steph overreacts to everything, which makes it very funny. But she's actually like the most resilient character in the show.
Oh yeah,
Like it
100%.
like the second you separate Shiro and whatever his name is, from each other, they
Sora.
collapse. Sora, thank you. They collapse. It has to be like, this intense will for them to go on when separated from each other. Um,
Yeah,
and it's like they're so codependent, like, they can't function properly solo unless there's an explicit goal they have to directly go towards, like in a straight line. Um, Whereas, stuff, it's like, yeah, my father figure died, my father died, the kingdom's in tatters, I'm not as good as I want to be, but I'm gonna lay everything on the line. And and she puts up with a lot of garbage. Um, that honestly, like if they had
well,
a
yes.
scene where like she's like crying because of it, it would ruin the flavor, but like they wouldn't have a scene like that, so the fun never
Yeah,
ends.
they have a scene that, there's a fine line there. You could have scenes of Steph being exasperated, being mad, Steph, saying Steph crying out how it's unfair, but if she were like genuinely crying, as in she were legitimately, you know, upset and things like this is too far or something like that, that would ruin the joke.
Yep.
Uh, it's a fine line though, because there's definitely, there's like you could have mildly humorous crying, like it, why is this happening to me, sort of thing. but there's definitely a step too far where all of a sudden it's not funny anymore.
Just like the
Uh,
furry
the
community.
other,
What?
yeah, right. No Game No Life, though, it definitely is a very, very interesting example. Plus, No Game No Life Zero is awesome, and I love that movie.
It was
And
pretty good.
I I know that it lost the humor of the show, but honestly, it gained so much else with just how visually stunning it was, and I think the way it explored the Sora Shiro relationship was really interesting.
Hmm.
Uh, it was just a really, really good movie. If it were, your mileage may vary on if you like it better than the show, but I think that at the very least, it was
Oh, I
not
don't.
noticeably worse.
It was.
I
It
don't think
was.
it.
It was. It was what it needed to be. Um, like the thing is that like when it comes to sequels, there's always that question: is it necessary or is it not? If it's not necessary, it shouldn't exist. Period. While No Game No Life Zero appears to be not necessary, it is actually incredibly necessary if you want any sort of lore as to why the world is the way it is.
Yes,
And it
I think it really helped me understand the Sora Shiro relationship because one thing that you actually get out of that movie, and this sounds strange unless you saw it and you've seen the show as well, it kind of recontextualizes the whole sexual side of that relationship as almost besides the point.
hmm
Like, and not even it's almost more than that because the idea is that a sexual relationship is something that's almost irrelevant to them because the connection that they have is on a much deeper level.
hmm
And it was a it was a very interesting thing. And I remember Digibro actually said something like that first. By the way, talk about someone who I'm disappointed in. He hasn't done any good content in like forever.
you didn't like the neurological chart. Then that was his big project that actually saw the light of day.
That looks super boring. I didn't
I
see it.
enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit because it helps me craft stories. So the way I do it is that the more information you as an author or whatever have, the more information you can stick into your stories, your work, etc. But not in the sense of like being autistic and just putting oh well, this is the distance between the earth and the sun, guys, ho ho. But rather the sort of like character development you can put in, and just sort of like nuance you can put it in. Not only is this person a lexical thinker, in other words, they think literally from one point to another, um, but they are lateral. No, sorry, not lateral. They are impressionistic as well, so that they can use their senses and their ideas to form like how they interact with the world. Far better than that. It's not that these things exist, therefore they're boring. These things exist, therefore they can be used.
Yeah, that's true. The thing is, though, that I like Digibro because he gives really, really good, when he puts his mind to it, I should say, he gives really, really good analyses and things like that, and he hasn't done that for a long time, and it's annoyed me.
You know what's weird?
Uh,
While it's certainly true he has not produced any real like work besides the neurological chart in months, I actually like him as he is right now. Like as strange as it is to say, like I always watch his videos when they come out. I always take a look at. I want to know what his opinions are about like music and stuff like that because his aesthetic sense is absolutely out of this world. Like it's so
that's a good way to put it.
like there's and to me that's more important than a whole lot of other things. Like when I was talking about sequels being necessary or not. Let's say I write a revenge fantasy story and like at the end of it the son of the main villain escapes the vengeance of the hero for the murder of his father, etc. Like I could write a sequel about this kid um going on a vengeance spree, just like I wrote the hero going on a vengeance spree, or I could leave the hero lying awake at night, unable to enjoy his victory, vengeance, and justice because he knows the kid's still out there. And it's a better ending, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the point of the story, though,
sure,
and what type of story you're trying to tell. I
sure,
think it's a more powerful ending if A, you're doing a sequel, and B, it's a powerful ending if you're telling a melancholy story.
sure.
But if you're not doing that type of story, then it might be the wrong move. But I get your point.
But
There's power there that a lot of people wouldn't even think of trying.
but Digibro would be able to quantify it and be able to say this X, Y, and Z. Works because Z, Y, and X. Which is
Yeah,
why I value him. Like Super Eye Patch Wolf is an experience. Um, Alexander is this sort of like ride along that's fantastic. A deep dive into a single subject. Like Digibro though is like kind of everything, but also like he has his touch on it.
you know what's funny is that like Mother's Basement, and he's the greatest punching bag in the world, right? For a good reason, which is fine and all, whatever. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually think he's the worst ever, though he has some really bad stuff. However, there were a couple things that were really eye-opening. I saw
Mm-hmm.
Digibro and Alexander put out videos that were on very similar subjects to Jeff's. First off, the Sword Art Online videos. I actually got like pissed on Digibro's behalf when Jeff like called himself the premier Sword Art critic, because I'm like, that's literally just a lie. That was Digibro 100%. He did it first, and he did it. The thing is, like, this is what I'm getting at. When you watch Digibro's critiques and compare them to Jeff's, it's almost laughable how much better Digibros are. Like, it's kind of embarrassing that he put out this content when there's this high of a level. He did a video on ReZero and why ReZero was a masterpiece, and the video was just kind of a puff thing, honestly. So whatever. But
Add
Alexander
content, add
also did a
revenue.
video. What was that?
Add content, add revenue, so on and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't hate the video, but Alexander also did a video where he explained his thoughts on ReZero, and he absolutely loved ReZero. And once again, it was like the difference in the two videos was almost embarrassing. Like Alexander's was deeply analytical. It got into the exact nitty gritty of why things worked and why they didn't. Why, the analysis of character, the things that ReZero did well. And Jeff's was like, oh man, I really like this character. She was cool. Amelia was cool. And Alexander's going on like why what was her name?
Yeah.
Rem. Yeah. Like what Rem represents to the narrative compared to what Amelia represents to the narrative, and how uh crap, I can't remember the protagonist's name. In case you can't tell, I thought ReZero was fine. So, which is why I can't remember it Suzuki or something. Which is
Yeah.
why I can't remember it all that well, because I thought it was a fine show. And even after Alexander's excellent video, I still can't get out of my head that it was fine. My issue with ReZero is this: it did the bare minimum of what character development should be in a show like that. And that's good, honestly. Like, there's nothing exactly wrong with that. It had character development. It did what a show would do, but
Mm-hmm.
what a show should do. But it's also like, I'm not going to call it the world's greatest show because the main character actually has an arc. It's not the world's most original arc. It's not the world's greatest arc. But it's good. It makes it better, certainly, than the average isekai uh,
Absolutely.
by a mile, and I like it. But it's also like, am I really going to go? Oh man, he was a moron, and I'm like, you guys are overthinking it. What he is was an otaku, and he was a selfish otaku, and he has to learn to not be a selfish otaku, and that's his arc, and it's good. I have no issue with this. It is a fine arc, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also like it's not that mind bending or anything. He's not going on this, incredible journey that we've never seen before. I mean, it's good. It's good. I like ReZero, but whatever. That's off topic. I just wanted to mention that because I saw Alexander and Mother's Basement's video. But it's the same thing. The third one that I saw was Jeff did a thing. Jeff has a series called Adapt or Die where he compares stories that were from different sources, like Spice and Wolf. He compared the light novel to the show, I believe, and he did it with ReZero as well, actually. And Digibro also had something that wasn't called Adapt or Die, but it was a video on the same subject. And he brought it up specifically due to Vinland Saga, which Digibro contended was an okay adaptation, but not great. And it was almost sad to look at. Jeff did much longer videos on multiple things, and Digibro did one video on it, and his video had so much more, so much better content. It made me like cringe when I looked back at Jeff's video. He really is garbage tier.
How many more views did he get than Digibro, or did Digibro get more views?
I have no idea. I didn't even look at the views. I could probably find it now though. Although
Go for it.
my computer works kind of slow, but let's see.
So while we're doing that, I'm gonna talk about something. Just tell us when you got it. So
Go ahead.
like the reason why I kind of bring up furries a lot and kind of the brand new animal stuff is because there's like a subculture there that's spending money. Like there's like I'm sort of like a blind man feeling up the elephant, um, which is a horrible analogy when you're talking about furries, but whatever. And so I'm seeing parts of the elephant, feeling parts of the elephant, and I have to describe something that is this massive elephant. And I gotta do it because otherwise this title is not going to make any more sense. But I'm saying that there's a money pool there that absolutely exists. That is even if it's an unconscious thing, not a souled purpose, is creating content. Like the joke is that sure, if you want to support yourself as an artist, all you have to do is make images in the interest of the furry community, uh, whatever that may be. And sure, you'll hate yourself, you'll vomit every 5 minutes while you're drawing it, but you'll get like $500 an image, and they don't even have to be really that good. Like this medium mode, baby mode, and you'll get tons of money off of it because they're willing to spend money on their on their secret desires, or not so secret. um and I'm wondering how much does it fund, does the stuff like BNA Beastars and so on sort of like feed into itself in a what's the term when like a reactor, uh, self self reinforcing sort of mode. Like it's easy to say furries pay for stuff that has furry stuff in it, but it's more than that. Like it becomes absorbed into the zeitgeist of the degenerates, and and sort of like spits out further copies of itself. Like the more it grows, the stronger it gets. The eyes glow. I am getting
You're
stronger.
making me sad because I loved Beastars and I'm loving BNA,
Beastars
and
was
and now you're
fantastic.
like
I mean,
it really was, and BNA is excellent, and
yeah.
now you're making me sad. Stop making me sad.
Ah, but sorrow adds such sweet savor to life. Sad
I'm
boys.
almost pulled up both videos. All right, so Digibro's video is what makes anime adaptations worth watching. Mixed media mistakes in anime. And I'm gonna be clear. I watched this whole video when it came out, and it's absolutely outstanding. It is insightful. It is interesting. It brings something to the table that other things on this topic did not bring before. Jeff has his series as well. Digibros recover webpage. There we go. Has 2.3k likes to 181 dislikes, which is a great ratio,
Mm-hmm.
by the way. So it's a very popular video.
30 to
Now,
1, it sounded
this
like.
something along those lines. This is the sad part, though. Jeff's video, and he has several, but this was the first one. It's just called Adapt or Die: How Great Manga Becomes Great Anime. 20k likes to 250 dislikes. Now, this is a travesty. Uh,
Because it's 10 to
both of
1.
these, yeah, but and it has so many more, almost 10 times the number of likes or something absurd like that.
Right.
Uh,
How many views does each have?
Let me see. Digibros has 36,635 views. Very respectable. Jeff's has 604,516 views. And this was before he became big. This was in 2016, so he was only like he wasn't like he was now, and this still had that many views.
Yeah. So, like,
And
the point of this is was why I made you search it up, is because like Digibro is the eternal artist, but Jeff knows how to work the ad system
this is 100% true. Jeff is nothing if not a commercial hack.
in all the best ways. Like there's like there
Although, okay, not all the best ways. The Naruto commercial is still it's the cringiest thing I may have ever seen in my entire life.
the Naruto
The
commercial
sad thing is,
is
the
itself
sad thing
art.
is, the sad thing is, I went into it genuinely interested in the subject because I said, I've never seen anyone try and actually defend Naruto. Maybe it was better than I've have my idea. I wonder what he's going to say. And then it was a commercial for the Naruto mobile game. It was truly. I did. You want to know something though? I watched the whole thing in like a sick fascination. I was appalled. I couldn't believe he did it.
I can't
The
believe he
mad
did it.
lad.
The absolute unit. Uh,
But he did it. He literally lied, said he was doing a video about how good Naruto was, and then instead made the entire video an ad for a mobile game. Shamelessly. Like I have nothing to say to that. It's just amazing.
how do you live with yourself, Jeff? Pretty good actually on these piles of cash. And he's like sitting there sipping a pimp cup, and like with a with a with a cane and everything.
See, that would be funny if Jeff wasn't a soy or no, it is funny because Jeff's actually a soy boy loser. Whose girlfriend like does porn, or no, he's wife now actually, but his wife like does porn,
Yeah.
which is hilarious.
No, it's
Honestly,
it's it's very sad. Like it's
it's
funny.
extremely sad, but I don't like Jeff, so that
Yeah, I
makes it
know.
funny.
It's true, but it's like
No, you're right. It is extremely sad. It's tragic, and but what makes it funny is that Jeff pretends he doesn't care, and we all know he's lying. But
right now, does he pay
what
for
can
her
he say
OnlyFans?
really?
That's the question. Does she
Yeah,
make him pay? Um,
that that's a great question. But yeah, so Digiro's video, they're not technically the same thing, but they're very similar.
right.
Adapt or Die and what makes anime adaptations worth watching. The thing is that Jeff's videos are basically just comparisons. Here
Yeah.
is what it does differently. And then he ends it with, does it work and why? And
Hmm.
often the ending will be completely toothless because it will be something along the lines of, well, they're both good, but for different reasons. It adds very little to the conversation.
Every
Whereas
opinion is
Digibro,
validated.
It's not quite as bad as that, and there is a real point there in the sense that judging it one to one isn't exactly fair. But that's the whole point. You have to add something to the discussion instead of just pointing out something that's trivially obvious.
Right.
Digibro did. His "What Makes Anime Adaptations Worth Watching" is essentially about, why anime exists in comparison to the manga, and what makes it worth existing and what makes it worth the cost and the effort.
Hmm.
And that actually adds to the discussion. It also helped me understand Digibro, and I do have to say one thing about Digibro is that he is the one guy I genuinely cannot guess, absolutely cannot guess what he will or won't like with the show.
Right.
Like, I would have sworn he would have liked the Trigger show, S. Gridman, and his comment on it was, "I remember literally nothing about it," and then he skipped ahead. I also would have thought he'd like Kaguya-sama, and he hated it.
You see,
Uh,
neither of those surprised me that he hated it, and I'll
I
explain
thought he
why.
would like Kaguya-sama.
So he's not actually into playing around with feelings and stuff like that.
That wasn't why I thought he'd like it, though.
Really? What did you think he liked it? He would like it.
I thought he liked it because it really took advantage of the medium of animation, which it
Really?
absolutely did, by the way. The way that the narrator was used, the way that the dramatic camera angles. I believe what he said was, "It's not a funny joke." When somebody like pointed out in the comments, "Dude, you're not getting it," and his response was, "That's because it's not a funny joke." But I'm like, I have to disagree with you. I think that everything they're doing is purposeful, and you're not giving it credit for that, which is why I thought he would like it. Wasn't
Yeah,
the romance aspect.
I getcha.
S.
So you're
Gridman, Gridman, I thought he would like because Gridman was a very weird throwback thing, and it was well made. There was nothing wrong. It wasn't my type of genre, but it was quite good for what it was. I thought he would be into like that sort of throwback thing, but no, he just had no recollection of it.
so
It,
the
it
thing
didn't make an impression.
so the thing about SS Gridman, and I'm gonna look stuff up because I don't like the only thing I remember about it was that big thighed girl. And you
No,
know it.
it was a good show. It did have and the unfortunate Japanese trend that's in at least some anime and light novels and things where it had like a sad sack protagonist that you're supposed to pretend to like.
Right.
Even Glepner, or at least even Glepner has that. They're trying to sell that this kid is a hero. Like he's afraid to transform, but he does it anyway to save people. And dude, shut up. He's such a pussy.
Right,
Uh,
which is why he needs somebody using him like a fursuit. You see how we've never actually left the subject.
Right. Like to be fair, Glepner I do think does it better, and that's one of the reasons my sister said I thought you'd hate Glepner because it's like edge e, all capitals hyphen 5 e's at the end, edgy. And he goes, and you hated Darwin's Game, and that was edgy. And I said that's because it was edgy for the sake of being edgy. Glepner
Hmm.
is legitimately making a point with it. For example, like I do not generally like etchy stuff. I find it, lesser degenerate at least, but still somewhat unhealthy, especially for younger viewers and whatever. But Glepner, first off, is not meant for younger viewers. But even besides that, Glepner, at the very least, when you're watching it, it is supposed to make you uncomfortable. If you're
Hmm.
being made uncomfortable by what you're watching, if it's making you, if it's making you kind of squirm, like you shouldn't be seeing this because it's too private, that is the point. That is what it's going for. And
Yep.
in that sense, I can respect Glepnir. So, yes, Darwin's Game, on the other hand, is capital E edgy because, kids like the edgy. And guns or
Yep.
something. I don't know. I didn't bother with Darwin's Game, so I've heard it described as like their superpowers or whatever, but it's also like a death game and whatever,
It's a
and it
death
looked dumb.
game.
It looked really dumb and terrible.
Deathu gameu. But
Yeah.
Hmm.
Glepner's different though, because Glepner was it's definitely an edgy show, and it's definitely a show that is very sexualized and whatever, but it's purposefully so. It's not there
Right.
just to titillate. Even in the sense where it does titillate, it's meant to do it for a reason and for specific reasons. My sister made a great point with Kill la Kill, the scene where Satsuki is molested by Ragyo,
Her
which
mother,
is a
by the
very
way.
controversial. Yeah, for those who don't know, which is an
Spoilers.
extremely controversial. Yeah, right. Which is an extremely controversial scene by fans of Kill la Kill. And I know you agree with me when I say I think it absolutely fits within the show and should be there. And as a matter of fact, as my sister pointed out, and I think she is right, it's actually a fantastic scene.
Oh
The
yeah.
reason it's a fantastic scene is because it's brilliant about putting you into the headspace of Satsuki. Because it is like at least somewhat erotic and but extremely uncomfortably so because you know that this is disgusting and but it's set up in such a way and directed and shot in such a way as to be erotic. The idea
Mm-hmm.
behind the scene is that you, the viewer watching it, are essentially in the situation of Satsuki, where you feel kind of humiliated for how you feel watching it, where you're also extremely angry that that you have to see this, and disgusted all at the same time, which is the headspace in a lesser way, of course, but which is the headspace of where Satsuki is.
Yep.
And it makes Ragyo, I think, one of the best villains. Honestly, I think you can make a case she's one of the all-time great anime villains because you normally see villains in two ways. You see very personal villains who are monsters because, they abuse people, they molest people, or even just they're serial killers like Kira on a local level. And you see villains who are very great villains, which is, they're world-ending threats. Fire Lord Ozai, from Avatar, uh, even Father from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. There are so many examples, and I'm blanking for no reason right now, but you
Like
get the idea.
like so.
The
Hold on. There's several like since we're mentioned JoJo, I'll step in real quick. There's
there's yeah,
like of
Dio.
yeah, Dio is like the personal, but he's like a greater villain. Honestly, if he knew that the descendants of the Joestars couldn't defeat him, he wouldn't even bother with them. Like that's like he doesn't care. Like it's only because he gets riled up around them and the thought of them that he
Yeah,
personally cares
exactly.
about them. Then you have Cars, who's like an explicit, or Poochie, who's an explicit world-ending threat. Like if you want to go from
Yeah,
like least personal to most personal, it goes like Cars, Diavolo, and Kira, then Poochie. Uh,
Kira's a little different. I mentioned him as a more personal, but that's because I'm just talking about like the
oh,
reason that Dio is such a great villain. The reason he's so great is because he is so powerful. He's the unstoppable threat who can destroy the world, and you're waiting for the big climactic showdown, which you get, and it's amazing in one of the greatest fight scenes in anime. And on the flip side of this, you have Kira, who is also very powerful and intimidating, but you hate him because he's in this, he's in this small but crazy, colorful town just offing innocent people.
yep.
And there's something much more personal about that, and a molester even more so.
Mm-hmm.
Molesters in fiction, you will absolutely, hopefully, if you're a rational human being, you will absolutely despise because they're doing something deeply personal that's truly harmful. But it's a different type of villain than the Dios of the world.
Yep.
What makes Ragio such a great villain is that she is both.
Which.
Ragio is a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic, powerful, world-ending threat that has to be faced in a climactic battle, and she is somebody who is absolutely loathsome because of how she treats her direct family.
Mm-hmm.
So Raggio really is one of the single most despicable villains in fiction.
Oh yeah, and it's like, which of course means that furries are in the depending on how you view them as either world enders or personal molesters, uh, are in that category. Like there's uh, how do I want to connect it in just the right way? Uh, with the sort of like things we're seeing now in anime in this season, like this is no 2012 or whatever year Kill la Kill came in. This isn't a gold
2016.
2016. Thank you. I don't know why I said 2012, but 2016, 2016, 2016. No, I was in college when Kill la Kill came out.
Let me Google it. I thought it was 20, but I could be very off. I
No,
know
I was
though
in
it was this
college.
decade, but Kill a Kill, Google.
Man, I was in college a decade ago.
2013.
All
So
right,
you were closer, but not quite right.
that's fair.
2013.
So like 2016, the year that the only good thing happened was that Trump got elected, depending what side of the aisle you're on. Um, that was such a
Yeah.
terrible year.
I don't know. That cheered me up.
It did cheered me up immensely, but the rest of the year was just trash. Um,
I, I'm just gonna throw out there that I remember absolutely nothing from that year except the election. So who knows?
it started off
Uh,
with David Bowie dying.
oh, that was all the celebrities dying. Yeah,
Yep,
no, no celebrities I cared about died.
I cared about
That
David Bowie.
sounds terrible, but that's terrible, but it's absolutely true.
That's fair.
I didn't really care about any of the celebrities.
So,
Oh well, whatever. Point is, Kill la Kill was 2013.
yeah. So like the thing about with Raggio and stuff like that, she pursues what she wants with absolute conviction, similar to Dio, except I'm gonna say with a lot less introspection. Like Dio is in touch with his emotions, as weird as it is to say. He's in touch with himself and what he wants, and so on and so forth. That doesn't mean he isn't like that. He's not going to be like what it was it. He doesn't need to think about anyone else. There we go. But with Raggio, she has no connection there. She has no conception of how she is or how um, her actions affect others. Like all it does is it's sort of like an internal misery engine that she cranks forever, which is of course a furry convention. Uh, but it
Yeah,
causes
Dio in a strange way, and this sounds off, but hear me out. Dio is not like cruel for the sake of being cruel, in the sense that Dio does everything with a purpose. It's a purpose that doesn't necessarily take other people into account, but
right.
there is a point to it. It's something he treats Jonathan Joestar like crap and kicks his dog because he hates dogs. But at the same time, he's not kicking the dog because, he likes pain. He's kicking it because he hates dogs.
Well, no, he
And
wanted to hurt
Jonathan
Jonathan.
Joestar, and he wanted to hurt Jonathan, who he had a very specific and grudge with. Actually, he causes, but he specifically needed Jonathan out of the way. So there was a purpose to it. Just like in the Egypt scene at the end of the show, he grabs the guy in the taxi, the politician, and they start running over civilians. Dio didn't say, I'm going to cause as much damage to other people as possible when I do this. He just said, I want to drive and the sidewalk's slightly clearer. But it'll kill people. Why are you telling me this? I don't care.
Right.
That's how Dio thinks. This politician, hey, I'm a politician, why don't you drive? Dio rips out his tooth, causes extreme pain. Why did Dio didn't do that because he wanted to cause the guy pain specifically. He did it because causing the guy pain did what he wanted. You know, he needed him to drive and he needed to torture him to do it, and that was the fastest way. But at the
Hmm.
same time, you also get people who are legitimately loyal to Dio. First, of course, you have Pucci most of all, but there were other people there who were calling him Lord Dio and seemed to be genuine, true believers.
Yep.
Like, there's a
The
charisma there that
Oh yeah.
Dio gives off that makes him, like, he's a worthy person to follow in that sense.
Yep. It's like he shows up and he has this aura about him that makes you want to follow him, and he does not disgust you. Like he like furries do. Like he shows up to Kakyoin and others, and they're like, yeah, this dude was scary. He shows up and he's got this mist around him, and like, various characters like, lose their minds. They want to run away or what have you. And you know, Dio just treats it as like, of course. Of course I deserve to be treated like this. And then it sort of self reinforces. Like a king who's self aware in all the worst ways, or like a king who's actually like a gamma in disguise, will sort of ruin that mystique by caring about what others think of them. No, you're going to put on the gaudiest yellow outfit you can find, and then start running down civilians because there's no cars in your way on the sidewalk. Like it's that lack of empathy, that assuredness that whatever they're doing is the right thing, that makes a villain like Dio, like Raggio, so much better than somebody who would be the wrong kind of introspective.
Yeah, the Pucci, of course, is the biggest example where Dio managed to turn Pucci into like a radical true believer in his cause. But they show the scenes where Pucci and Dio meet, and it's very interesting because it's hard to say if Dio is actually capable of friendship, but he certainly treated Pucci like a friend.
Yeah.
Was it because he actually liked Pucci, or was it because he thought he could use Pucci? It's hard to say.
You see, I think there's a mix. Like Dio spent 100 years without companionship. The only companionship was his adopted brother Jonathan's corpse. Uh, like what sort of like he comes out of it like he's like, yeah, I don't want to turn the world into zombies anymore. Like I don't know what I want. Like he just sort of like sits there. I want to kill the Joestars, it's because they'll come after me,
The
but
interesting thing is when Pucci first meets Dio, he meets him when Dio heals his foot,
yep.
if you remember that scene. And for absolutely no reason, supposedly. Though, once again, with Dio, it is very, very hard to tell. Like, how far in advance was he playing 4D chess? Who
You see,
knows?
I don't know. Like the thing about Dio is that he's a sensual sort of person. He doesn't how do I want to put it? Like what matters to him most is how he feels and what he's doing, not necessarily, some big grand master plan. Like he fights the Joestars because they show up. In reality, he had every opportunity just to like chillax or run away and then fight them from a position more advantageous to him. Uh, like if he was.
Yeah, although that was a very interesting thing, though, because on the one hand, he does face them when they show up and does not run, but on the other hand, he was certainly hoping that they would die before they got there.
Yep. So it's like um it's more than him just being like this 4D chess kind of guy. Like I don't really believe in him being a 4D chess kind of guy. Like he can play chess. He played chess back in Victorian times when everyone played chess and they bet money on it and stuff like that. It was like our card games today.
Oh yeah, that was an episode, wasn't I? Forgot about that, but you're
Yeah.
right.
But that's not the same as him being like, "Yes, and then I will be killed by the Joestar's descendants."
No, I don't mean that in that way. But what I mean is like with Pucci,
Hmm.
when he heals Pucci, what was his end game there? I mean, was he?
Like,
There's part of it that Dio could have just been showing off. But on the other hand, he doesn't tell Pucci what he did. Pucci has to infer it afterwards. But
hmm
why would Dio do it unless he thought that Pucci would show up in his life again somehow? And the ambiguity is intentional, and it also helps to explain Pucci's loyalty to Dio.
hmm
Uh, you might be able to, listeners might be able to tell, and I know that any listeners eventually, since we have two people on and one is probably me.
it is
Anyway,
almost certainly you. Get off the street. No, I'm kidding.
yes. Eventually, when we hopefully get listeners when I post the link on Tuesday, may know may realize as I'm talking that Pucci is definitely my favorite JoJo villain. I think that he's a fascinating villain and very complex, and I don't know. I just found him really interesting. I'm mostly in the minority though. I do think he's considered a pretty good villain. I don't think he I don't think he's an unpopular villain, but I think I'm in the minority in saying he's my favorite JoJo villain. But
The
that's fine.
people's favorite JoJo villain is whatever season's airing. Uh, my personal favorite though isn't Cars. It's the Pillarmen as a whole, just because of how it works in their
That's
art.
interesting.
Like Dio's pretty great. Like if I was going to say like what's the strongest villain, it's Dio. But the one I liked the most and wanted the more out of than I got was the Pillarmen. Like I liked every scene they were in.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
They
Part
had
two is so underappreciated.
but it's the gateway. Like it's the gateway most people get into JoJo properly. Uh, like they had this otherworldly
Well, the
grace.
reason is because everybody tells you get through part one because that's the weakest part, and then you'll see why it's great.
Yeah,
However, when I hear people talking about the series and fans talking about the series, battle tendency is only ever brought up to when people say, "Man, battle tendency isn't appreciated enough,"
yeah, but that's because it's
which
like
is true.
it's a level of complexity. Here's the Indiana Jones plot. They need to get the
It's
Redstone of
so
Asia.
good though.
But
It has
like,
better character. It's better
yep.
overall than Stardust Crusaders, certainly.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Like the only
Stardust
thing.
Crusaders has this amazing like final five fights or so,
Oh
which
yeah.
elevates the entire show as a whole. And it has individual good fights in between, but it's extremely repetitive, and the characters are eh.
Yeah. But it's like, but it
Part
was
two
a.
has amazing characters.
Oh yeah. Like it's like so. Here's like the JoJo theory. Part one is the foundation. Part two is the blossoming, and everything beyond there is just Araki getting better every single time. And even then, even though I don't like JoJolion, it's not because it's bad. It's just not my speed. Like that's it. It is entirely personal preference. Um,
I can't say I dislike. I wouldn't go as far as to say I don't like Joe Jolian. I do like Joe Jolian. In
I do.
fact, at this point in the story, I'm very invested at what's happening. I just like it least.
Yeah. Like here's the thing. It's like I like hamburgers, but I also like chicken tenders. So which one do you like more? I like hamburgers more than chicken tenders. So you hate chicken tenders? No.
JoJo is interesting though because like if the whole thing with part one as the weakest and whatever, at least being the consensus. All real JoJo fans, when they go, "Can I just skip part one?" They will go, "Absolutely not. No, you cannot."
Yep.
And you want to know something? whether or not you really like part one, I do think it's pretty good.
Oh, it
But
is.
whether you do or not, it is absolutely necessary to watch to establish Dio because it gives the ending of Stardust Crusaders way more weight.
Oh yeah.
Without watching part one, the ending of Stardust Crusaders doesn't hit home nearly as much. But if you
Mm-hmm.
watch part one, it becomes like this ultimate generations long showdown.
Oh yeah.
You know, it really brings the whole thing full circle in a way that you just wouldn't get without part one. The weight, the history, the background is all there, as is Speedwagon.
As is Speedwagon.
Because I don't want to say it salvages part three because that's not true. However, I would say that without part one, the ending of part three would be significantly weakened.
Yeah. So like when you're looking at whole like arcs and like story arcs, like even though each part of JoJo is supposed to be self-contained to a point, each one
Yes,
has weight carried over from the previous part. Like Jojo,
100%, including part seven, by the way.
oh yeah, like in part 7 to 8, it's practically a theme in and of to itself. But like if you look at like Jotaro Kujo, he starts off and you think he's this rough and tumble, rough talking, women respecting. Uh, that's a joke, by the way. There's a meme where it's like,
I figured.
me respect women, and it's like my right hand has respect written across it. Uh, but it's right across the knuckles because
What's
you got
his
to keep
mother
that
like?
P appearance.
Jojo, I love you. Get away from me, bitch. She stares at him and goes, okay.
All right, and she's like, I have such a manly son, and it's like, what?
Yeah, and she's like, oh, I have such a manly son. She's like, Jojo runs up and hugs him and goes, don't you go, you're embarrassing yourself. Back off, bitch. She just like stares and goes, okay.
All right,
But then
and
she's kidnapped and Jotaro's like, now shit's gonna go down.
it's like, yeah, pretty much.
You
Uh,
you you kidnapped you hurt or not kidnapped, you tried to kill my mother. Now shit is going down.
and it's not like he meant to do it either. It's just gonna happen. It's just gonna go. So he goes from it. So he goes from hard ass to Clint Eastwood knockoff, and so on, to like someone who can actually work with other people and is working to like fix the world, not just be his own man. This pillar, which could always just stand alone, but it's like he goes from like, if I don't like a meal, I walk away without paying, so on and so forth. You know,
Oh
uh,
yeah, that was pretty funny.
right?
That was with the fight with what's his name?
Kakyoing.
The one with the 7 page. No, yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, it was the 7 page aura. Uh,
Oh yeah.
crap. Steely Dan. That
Yeah.
was it. It was the Steely Dan fight. That's why he gives his little speech where he goes like, basically, I'm not a good guy, right? Like, if a
Yeah.
meal isn't good, I'll walk away without paying. I get into fights and whatever. But then he's like, but you, sir, you are literally the worst human being I have ever met in my life. I believe that was it. It was
Yeah.
either that or maybe it was like his fight with Kakyoin,
Yeah.
like the original.
He goes over it a couple different
One of
times.
those, yeah, one of those times he gives his speech where he's just like, yeah, I know I'm not a good guy, but you, sir, are worse.
So
And
he
of course, the point of Jotaro is that actually he's a hero.
yeah. He's like the best type of 90s anti-hero that was made. So like he goes from that to working with people, and even though he's still a very tough dude, it's more about him um working with other people than anything else. And then, like part five, he's working with Koichi to figure out whether Dio has any children and stuff like that. You don't really see him. Then in part six, we see how his family is. Well, guess what? His hardness paid for him with a divorce and a daughter who's like in and out
Although that
like
was an interesting I believe what happened is that Jotaro, at least this is implied, stand users attract other stand users, so Jotaro
Hmm.
thought that he was bringing too much danger to his family, so left for that reason. However, that seems like a pretty poor excuse, which Jolene sort of points out
Yeah,
when she basically says, I really, really don't want to hear your excuses because it doesn't matter what they are, and she's absolutely correct.
yeah. Like in the
There's no way to justify. There's no real way to justify it because if you were not sure what would happen, look at where your daughter is right now.
right, and they're
You know,
having a first conversation in like 5 years while she's in prison. Like that's how bad it is. But at the same time, he's there. He's trying to be a good father. And like there's this mini story arc where he's like either comatose or whatever for
yeah, that's the majority of it actually.
like
But
three
yes,
fourths of the series ish, more like 5/8. No, not 5/8. Sorry, 7/8. Uh, and then all of a sudden he shows up, saves his daughter, and it's like
that's one of the best scenes in all of
best
JoJo.
scenes,
That's
best, absolutely.
that when that was first off that entire fight that was the Sea Moon fight, and that's
Yep.
maybe that whole fight is in my opinion, and I'm actually very much in the minority of this, but I think that's the pinnacle of JoJo. Generally,
Ooh.
not that it had consistently the best fights, but that was the best that JoJo was that section, but that's another story. The point is, that was when Kyuchi is sensing that Jolene is alive, and he's going, but that's impossible because she just had her insides turned, she was just turned inside out. And that's when you get the iconic Jolene Cujo moment where he sees her and like his jaw drops in shock because Jolene's entire body has been contorted into a Mobius strip so
It's
that
pretty
she can
wild.
remain. It is. And then Kyuchi, when he comes to himself, he's like, you know what, though? You can't move fast enough to stop a bullet, and he manipulates gravity to. Now that you're so weakened, you can't move fast enough to stop a bullet, and he manipulates gravity to get a gun from a guard, and then suddenly everything pauses, and it cuts forward, and Kyuchi's like, "What the hell? What just happened?" And then you get this full splash page of Jotaro standing there cradling Jolene in his arms. Just an all-around, everything about that scene is amazing.
Right. It's like I like it. Like Poochie's the type of guy to shoot a dude, you know, because that's the way you just do it. Several times he like just cuts from like yes
Well,
I
he's
could
trying very hard to kill Jolene and them at that point, and he
right.
does, which is what makes, and yeah, spoiler, right, for what, a 20-year-old story now? But it's like
Yeah.
15. So spoiler, guys. By the way, as I'm talking, Digibro has a video called "Finding Your Voice and Finding Your Audience" that literally just popped up now.
Who
But let's watch it later because we need to get these live streams out there.
we
Uh,
do actually.
Whatever. To finish what I was saying though. Um,
I got all
yeah,
kinds of.
Kyuchi. That's what makes the ending of Part 6 so great.
Yeah.
Like Kyuchi murders all of them but Emporio.
Yep.
And this was when Araki was like he had really, really come a long way writing wise, and the use of irony in this fight was exceptionally well done.
Hmm.
How he was so hyper focused on the Joestars the entire time, and Emporio has obviously the weakest stand for combat. And not only that, Kyuchi at this point is literally omniscient because
Hmm.
he is the only one who is not fated in advance in terms of what his actions will be. So, and even more interestingly, he has all of the cards in the sense that he doesn't even need to kill Emporio at that point, which he points out himself. He could just continue the fast forward to the Cape Canaveral point, which would have reset everything. Everybody who's listening, Part 6's ending is extremely convoluted. Uh, But Pucci could have fast forwarded things to the Cape Canaveral point if he wanted to and not worried about it. He just says he wants to take out Emporio now so he doesn't end up as a loose end later. And he figures, why not? I'm omniscient now, right? You know,
Yep.
I won't be after that point, but I am right now. So let's just take a pause for a second and handle this. And then Emporio manages to outsmart him by using his brother's stand.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that it worked is that it was something that was not something that Emporio had previously to that point. So it was not something that Pucci could be aware of. And the person who activated the stand was Pucci. He was tricked by Emporio into activating the stand. So Pucci, being the one whose actions are not fated, ends up being the person who destroys himself. It's such a great ending, and how many layers of irony and setup and payoff are used in that moment after he friggin' kills everybody quite brutally. Uh, they don't just die either; they're like bloodily murdered.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
part six is extreme. Is part six? I know the ending is very controversial, and this I know you agree with me. I think it's brilliant. I think it's perfect. I wouldn't change anything about it.
Yep.
I think that he nailed it.
Like there's a
However, I can understand it. You do need to pay attention to fully understand it, but I would mark that as a point in its favor.
the more you sort of dive into high class works of art like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the more you can kind of just glean from it. Great techniques, great ideas. You know, reasons why art devoted around a fetish will be just
Yes,
bad by definition. Uh, just
looped
because,
around back to the subject.
yeah, I'm actually really good at that, Anthony. Ho ho.
There we go.
Yep. Uh, so it creates this sort of this focus away from what's good, more to what titillates. While a stand battle can titillate us with this great fight, action sequence, and all this just good stuff, it's not the same as getting an action stand fight that has like plot connection and a reason to be there. Like even though Stardust Crusaders like mid plot is the weakest of all the JoJos, uh, except for maybe part one because the two knights are kind of like it only really gets good when Zappelli dies. Um,
Yeah, although honestly, I think that the Joestar Mansion fight's very underrated.
oh, it's a fantastic fight. Uh,
That was actually what kind of sold me on JoJo, where I watched it and I'm like, okay, was this episode 3? Because I'm
right,
pretty sure this was like the climax to an entire series. And
right.
I'm like, the mansion was burned down. He fell into the depths after this climactic battle. Are we like not even halfway through yet? That's
Yeah. So
damn.
let me continue on though.
Yeah, go ahead.
With the focus being off craft or creating something that will sell in a good way. Like you want like at a certain point like Araki is an absolute businessman. He is willing to do what it takes to keep his manga in there, and he's not so caught up in his own, sniffs that he's gonna not put his all into it to create a marketable
Oh
piece of
yeah.
work. Like he's the perfect mix between Digibro and Jeff Thu. If they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. Um, so like you get that sort of thing, and it will always be head and shoulders above anything that is created for honestly any other reason. Like as artists, we should always strive to create things that are even if they're not like the most marketable thing in the world. Is that if they
Well,
found your book in a bargain bin, no one would be like, ugh, because of what they found in it. Like, if I'm writing
Yeah.
the space fantasy I'm writing, the only thing that might be kind of about it is if you don't like science fantasy. Like that, it's literally a genre problem, not a subject problem. Like the more things you can say, well, they didn't read it because of they don't like fantasy or they don't like young adult
Yeah.
novels or whatever.
And that I honestly can't fault people because you
Yep,
all have your preferences.
exactly.
Yeah. There are certain things that I would say, like, I'm not going to argue it's bad. It's just that I
Hmm.
know that I personally won't like it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like when that's your biggest issue, uh, it'll 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 set your story at a different level than if somebody said I don't like it because everyone has a libido set to 11, or I don't like it because there's some weird anatomical features on everyone that I just don't like, or it's bad dialogue that's not even connected to the subject. It's just stuff they're talking about, like some sort of motive rant, like communist rants or objectivist rants are themselves fetishes, addictions, that you can foist on other people in the midst of your books and other art. That, things like
Ayn
JoJo.
Rand.
Yep. And she got away with it. Like, you aren't Ayn Rand.
She did.
She did. The
She got away
absolute
with it
mad
because
lad.
she. Uh, yeah, I will say this about Ayn Rand. I think she's underrated in one very specific way, which is that all criticisms of her are correct, but she's such a talented writer, it's worth reading anyway.
Hmm.
Like if you give me a list of reasons why you dislike Ayn Rand, that it's a huge lecture, that she caused them, like I can't tell you that you're wrong. You are not wrong, but that doesn't mean she isn't worth reading.
Hmm. In fact, I could say that she's almost certainly worth reading, for a certain definition of it. Um, just I don't care about her subjects.
Heinlein is like this to a much, much lesser extent. Uh, like the whole appeal of Starship Troopers is that there's very little plot. It's just an exploration of a certain type of government system.
Yeah.
And with a really fun battle scene at the end of it. And I actually really like Starship Troopers. It's a very good book, by the way.
What about the movie?
The movie was a
It's a
propaganda
very.
piece.
That's
It
my
was
brother.
stupid.
That's my
That
brother.
was awesome.
I never watched the movie and I don't care about it. I never will watch the movie because nothing about it interests me.
Movies like a book, only stupider. It's either a good or bad thing depending on your perspective.
Oh,
Yeah,
perspective.
it's
Oh ho,
yeah,
perspective.
right. Incidentally, he can't hear you speak because I have headphones in.
Oh, I know.
So you can insult him if you'd like.
I
Yes,
will
do
not.
it.
He said do it. He's
That's
daring
that's
you,
that's
Ben.
an example of the fetish thing we're talking about. Perhaps he is a crypto furry.
Tell you what, Frankie, he did just insult you, but
What
maybe not. I will not tell you. You'll have to watch the live stream for yourself and give us a
Ho
view.
ho.
All right.
He if you didn't hear, he said all right.
That's fair.
But
Yep.
damn though, that was dark. That went dark.
Crypto
That
furries
one.
in the
Bad, huh?
family? Absolutely. I can't
Well, he
imagine.
said something that bad, huh?
He did, yes, Frankie. He said something that bad.
So, like, if you want to
Worse,
go
even.
dark,
I think he doesn't like
like,
me
my
anymore.
favorite line for the quarantine is, so how's the quarantine affecting you? Well, it's really affecting my serial killing. And then I sigh like that. And it's like,
And then
usually
you
it's a,
write sincerely, Kira.
right? It's like wash your hands. Kira spends a day washing his hands.
Yeah, really. Yeah, Yoshikage Kira. You just put no. You put out a little thing with a picture of Kira and says Yoshikage Kira says, "Wash your hands."
Scary.
Um, you were going on though. You were saying something about like great works of art, how they have different layers and layers of meaning. You can
Yeah.
interpret them. I think that that's what I mean when I say that that's the pinnacle of JoJo. One reason for that is that everybody considers, and I think you can at least make the argument that they are quite correct, is Part 7 is the masterpiece.
Hmm.
Uh, and Part 7 probably is the most consistently excellent JoJo. There really are very few slow bits. I mean, maybe a couple of sections, but to put it another way, everybody criticizes the beginning of it for being slow before the stand battles start, and I actually was really engrossed in just the horse race.
Yeah. Like,
So even that part, even the quote unquote slow section, like I was already invested in the story.
right.
Plus, it was very well, like it was just a really well written horse race. It was exciting. It was, good choreography, race choreography. It was just well
Is that a
done.
reference to the
And
chariot
I was
race in
like,
Ben-Hur?
no. My brother says I reference the chariot race in Ben-Hur. It is completely unrelated. Like literally completely unrelated.
All
I
right.
doubt that Araki even thought of it when he
Almost,
made it
almost
there.
nothing is ever related to the chariot race in Ben Hur, but it gets brought up way more than you think it is, than you think it will be.
Really?
Like people
Because
do bring
I
it up
to me
sometimes.
it's just like it's a western. That's it. It's a western.
Yeah.
It's a weird western, which is a subgenre. That's exactly what it is.
Yep.
Uh, there's nothing fancy there. He's not like hiding his influences. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if I found a quote where he called it a western. But whatever. Not my point. The point is, I think that part six, the climax of part six, is really the first point of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure that almost demands multiple rereadings. Uh, Part
Mhm.
5, there are sections of it. Part 4 and below, there are sections of it that make it worthwhile. Especially 5 has some deeper stuff going on. But Part 6, I think that the ending of Part 6 is something that you simply cannot fully appreciate unless you reread it. And when you reread it, it gets better.
Oh
It
yeah.
doesn't decrease in value. It actually, there is more to appreciate about it. That's the mark of a masterwork.
Mhm.
When
And it
thing,
uses everything
depth.
from it before. All the themes, all the character development. Like, some of it's lost along the way due to natural character death, etc. Like, you don't need the full cast there at the end. You need all the will, all the inheritance, all the heritage from group to group to to reach that end and then make it all pay off. And he did it. He
And
absolutely
it's
did it.
true. Yeah, it's this insanely. This is why I was talking. I've had this for a while, and maybe I'll write something on it for Castalia House. Because the idea of experimental fiction, I actually don't have an inherent issue with. The real problem is not doing something that's risky or experimental or that readers might not necessarily get originally. It's about the motive of why you're doing it.
Mhm.
Ulysses, for example, was specifically written to be impossible to read unless you went through the Odyssey with a fine toothed comb to understand every tiny reference. And also, there were sections that were intentionally made to just be boring without the reader in mind. Finnegan's Wake is just straight nonsense, also by James Joyce. Those are
Mhm.
experiments for experiment's sake, and they are worthless trash. Literally, they are worth less than a dime store, Lord of the Rings knockoff novel, like The Sword of Shannara or whatever. It is worth less than that. However, there's the Gene Wolfes of the world, and I think the reason I brought this up is the ending of Stone Ocean that are absolutely, I would use the phrase risky, experimental, you know, not maybe what the readers intended, but the difference between what they are doing, the Gene Wolfes and the Iraqis of the world are doing is that the experiments are not intended to make the book less readable. They are not intended to make the book less digestible. They are intended to make the book better. And you might be wrong. It might be an experiment that fails, but that doesn't make it a worthless idea. It makes it a failed experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it hits. Christopher Nolan is another good example. I've seen people try and criticize his style as being too in love with it, and while I understand what they're saying to a point, I don't agree because I don't think that Nolan's style, at least normally, I'm sure that there are times it's excessives and whatever, but normally, I think that Norman's style is there purposefully. He is trying to create a certain atmosphere, a certain idea that contributes to the story. The ending of Stone Ocean is a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the ending of Stone Ocean, I would absolutely agree, and I think Araki would as well, probably, although he might not use these exact words, is experimental. It's something that I literally can't imagine like anybody else doing but Araki in that specific situation. It is not the end point of the story that anybody would have envisioned going into it. And honestly, it didn't have to be the ending to be a good story. There were other ways to end it that would have been perfectly satisfying, but they wouldn't have been great. They wouldn't have been transcendent, which is what the ending of Stone Ocean was. And if you read Araki's words on it, it becomes very clear. He didn't write the ending of Stone Ocean. And for those who don't know, I'm going to spoil a 15, 20, whatever year old piece of media. So I guess spoiler warning. If you haven't read it yet, you really should, though. Anyway, so the ending of Stone Ocean, for people who end up listening who don't know it, the universe is literally reset. The difference with the new universe is that everybody except for Emporio, who was there and affected by Pucci directly, who's our villain, uh, has been resent into the new universe, but with Pucci cut out of it. The influence of Pucci is now completely gone from this new universe. And with the influence of Pucci gone, Jotaro is no longer avoiding Stans being sent after him to try and kill him, meaning he could be a better father to Jolene, and
Mm-hmm.
their relationship is fixed. There's also the other characters are a little bit different. You could say a butterfly effect, but there's also the idea that the theme of the story, do you believe in gravity? So you have the other characters in the story, even though they might not necessarily have been there because of Pucci originally,
Mm-hmm.
with the absence of Pucci changing the lives of Jolene and Jotaro, because they were always going to be on a crash course of destiny or fate. They were, their lives are rearranged so that everybody meets in much healthier circumstances. And it's the same world and the same characters as they would have lived if the villain hadn't ruined their lives. Right? He has been cut out of the world. But of course, the reason that this is a very controversial ending, and I understand it, I get it, why it's controversial, is because essentially what happens is the story of Stone Ocean is literally wiped away. Everything that you just saw, everything that you just read, all of their struggles, all of their relationships are gone now.
Mm-hmm.
They no longer exist. But that doesn't mean that what they did wasn't worth it,
Mm-hmm.
because what really happens at the end of all of that is it's not so much about, like I said, there's just so many things going on there.
Oh yeah.
But
And then it's
the
like
it,
it's a
it's not a
moment of almost triumph when like he goes out of the
it's a
prison.
moment of
Hold on.
mingled melancholy and triumph.
Right. Where he goes out and he sees Jolene with her friends. It's like, yeah, we're gonna go talk to my dad. I'm gonna get married to the serial killer. And
Not anymore, probably.
right,
I
one
mean,
hopes.
I would guess. One would hope.
Yep.
Although it would be really funny if Anasui's life wasn't affected at all, and but he just wasn't caught.
Right.
That was the only difference. Anasui still killed his girlfriend. He just wasn't caught this time.
Right. Uh.
No, but honestly, that whole ending, because it ends with the scene of Emporio. The whole world resets, and Emporio is just like standing there in the rain, shivering because holy shit, what just happened? Where am I? Where are my friends? Like, am I the only one? Are they all still dead? What did I just do? Kind of thing. And you're also there kind of with Emporio. Like, you're reading the story and going, is this it? Is this how they're going to end the story? Just, Emporio's there alone? Because that's not satisfying at all. And then suddenly, like in the distance, I think the first thing you see is Hermes. You hear her voice, and it's clearly Hermes because she has a very distinct way of talking. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
she curses all the time and yells a lot, and it's a very rough, coarse speaking style. And then they show Hermes, and all of a sudden, all of the characters from Stone Ocean kind of just start showing up again. Because, do you believe in gravity, right?
Exactly.
You know, the
The,
all of these
all of these
people were
people were
always.
always.
Why am I
Why am I
listening to my
listening to
voice
my
on
voice
through
on
the
through
chat?
the chat?
Hawk.
Hawk.
This isn't for
Sorry
critique.
about that. I know I got mixed up. Hang on.
What
Why is that
I'm
what's
screen
gonna
white?
What's
I'm
happening?
gonna
happening?
mute you. All right. Uh. No, Sable, I'll unmute you, but this isn't for critique. This is a live stream thing. But should I have referenced? So VWX is referencing a whole bunch of stuff. With it.
You're blowing my mind here because I'm hearing double of everything.
There we go. It should turn off. Um.
Sorry, Sablehawk.
That double hearing.
No, it's
Yeah,
So
I'll finish. Okay, I'll just finish that thought, but make it short. The point is, what then becomes the point of Stone Ocean. It becomes like, what was the point of what you were reading? And I think the idea behind the ending of Stone Ocean is that things may not always end the way you want them to. Things may not always go the way that you planned. Life may not throw you, you know, life may not hand you the best cards, but what happens instead might even be better.
yep.
And that sense of loss is not necessarily, it will never go away, but that doesn't mean it won't be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, the story and the relationships built in Stone Ocean are gone, and only Emporia was going to remember them. But that doesn't mean that what they went through didn't matter. It meant that they lost something, but that what happens as a result of that isn't what they wanted, isn't what they expected, but that doesn't make it the best possible outcome. And I think
Right.
that's why Stone Ocean, there are many, many other themes to explore there. Ocean has had a decent video on it.
Stone Ocean
Uh,
is an absolute like depth that you can troll forever and not even hit the bottom of it. Just because it's everything Iraqi, you know, needed
once you
to
reach
do
the ending,
once you reach
yes.
the ending. Like
And
sure.
that's why Steel Ball Run, once you get there, is almost like Iraqi operating on or close to that level for the entire narrative, which
Mm-hmm.
is why Steel Ball Run is so great. It's
Mm-hmm.
also because he had a month to do every chapter, and his artwork went from really, really great to absolute god tier and arguably the best ever.
Yep. Like Joe Jolian, like art is pretty good, but it doesn't compare to Steel Ball Run or Stone Ocean at all. Like if we're
The
talking peak of art, it's like Sea Moon and like Poochie's final stand, as well as like the climax of of Steel Ball Run, because like people don't like the Dio fight as much as they like the Valentine fight. But it was like the Valentine fight was the emotional climax slash like thematic climax. There was still a race to win, and there was still
That's
like
true.
that plot line
And
to
there were
finish up.
loose ends.
Yep, and they
There
needed.
were loose ends.
Yep. So and they
Plus,
just
it gave Lucy a really badass moment.
right.
Terrific payoff to that. It was extremely clever. That's what I get back to. You know, you read a mystery novel, for example, and when you see a really cleverly done reveal, you know, a good one, then you go, "Oh man, why didn't I think of that? That's perfect." That's kind of what you get at the climax of Steel Ball Run. The crap, what'd they call it? I can't remember. I can't remember the name of the battle. High wire, high
Mm-hmm.
voltage, high
High
voltage. At the end
voltage.
of Yep. At the end of the high voltage fight, when Lucy shows up, it gave you that moment. So,
Mm-hmm.
once again, to spoil what I believe at this point is a decade-old story, uh, or close to it. So, spoilers, guys. Yeah. And, like, we're going to see an anime within the next, 5 years minimum. No way.
10.
Yeah, 5, 10 years, maybe, if we're lucky. Anyway, the ending of Steel Ball Run is Dio, the alt universe, as they call him in the wiki, Diego Brando from another universe. So we'll call him Alt Dio 2. Uh, alt Dio 2 shows up to steal the MacGuffin of the story, which everybody's been going after the entire time, the Holy Corpse. And one of the characters is waiting there, Lucy Steele, who is a 14-year-old girl who has been wrapped up in this from the beginning and uh, had this major character arc where she was, originally a damsel in distress, and then she had to, figure out a way to take agency, but in a way that was not obnoxious and, I don't know, SJW, but in a way that was very not obnoxious in SJW because Iraqi's not a friggin' hack. Uh, just throwing that out. But the ending of the story has Alt Diego 2 tells Lucy when she's like, you really don't want to do this. And he says, oh, you're very cute. So I'm going to kill you. But before I do, I'm going to bring you as low as a woman can go. And he's like, anyway, I'm taking the corpse. And then she's like, all right. And she opens up a bag, and the head of the original Alt Dio shows up. And the reason this is such a great reveal is because it pays off on so many different things that if you were paying attention, you theoretically could have predicted this as a solution. That's why it's great. Because we know
Mm-hmm.
we could pull things from other universes, right? Copies of them. And if you pull a copy in and it touches the original, then it will be destroyed. So Dio, the original Alt Dio, dies earlier in the story. So because he is dead, she thought of this plan. Her and the other Steel, male Steel. I don't even remember his first name. He was Steel to me.
He's
Mr.
basically
Steel.
Speedwagon without the baseness of Speedwagon.
Yeah, he ended up being a pretty good character in the end.
Yep.
He was smartly executed. But anyway, the point is they come up with this plan to grab the head of the corpse of the original Alt Dio and bring it over so that with Lucy waiting there, he would not feel threatened. So he would come in not expecting there to be any threat because Lucy is such an unthreatening character, and then she could reveal the head to him. And of course, since they are both copies of each other from other dimensions, we all know that if they get too close to each other, they will get destroyed. And that is exactly what happens. And I remember reading it and seeing what happened, and I had the light bulb moment that you get with all great reveals of that type, where you
Mm-hmm.
start connecting the dots in your head and you realize that it makes perfect sense.
Yep. And that in itself is more important than the actual events. If it doesn't make sense, it shouldn't be in there. Like, I spend an immense amount of thought power.
Exactly.
Like, I spend an immense amount of thought power making sure that all the wacky, ridiculous stuff I put into my books, whether it's singing goblins, wrestling a minotaur on a giant's dessert table, or any number of things. It doesn't matter what it is. I make sure that all the events in this story have allowed for these events to take place. They're in a mech. I'm going to have a guy ramp a spider tank onto a mech, and then he's going to ride that mech like a horse. Because both of them, like the mech's like damaged, it can only move, it can't fight, but he needs to like move his spider tank to the front. Guess what? He's going to ride that mech like a horse, shooting from its back while it's trying to buck him because he jammed the servos up. Like, it's going to be completely ridiculous nonsense. But at no point are people going to be able to say, you have not put the elements of this into it from chapter 1 or relevant chapter
Exactly.
X. And,
But that's what makes the ending of Steel Ball Run and great and well executed mysteries so clever, because you have to do this on two levels. You not only need to have it all make sense and add up, especially important in a mystery, but to write a really good mystery, or in this case, it's not a mystery per se, but it's a similar technique, a great reveal of that kind. You need to make it something that the viewer can figure out and that makes sense for the characters to do, but that you also don't figure out. You can figure it out. It makes sense that the characters would do that. It is possible for it to happen, but you have structured things so cleverly that you didn't.
mm-hmm. So,
That's what makes that scene like it brings it up another level from good to great.
yep. So at this point, we've been talking for a rather long time, as we tend to do. I'm going to say, you have any final words for us?
Final words. Don't be a furry. I do like BNA though.
So the reason why I sort of skipped around and almost rarely talked about furries is because we're talking about things like that furries don't really have or don't really get for what their thing is. BNA, Beastars, etc. Not necessarily Zootopia, are good because they are inherently good shows that might be co opted for this fandom or the other fandom, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're anything other than their own thing. Because they're their own thing, they can stand up against something that might be itself distasteful, like furry culture, or furries themselves, or the fursuits that they do horrible things in. It's more than trappings. It's a quality deep inside itself that will out. Quality always outs. It's why Nick Holt's Galaxy's Edge stands on top of all the other Star Wars pretenders. It's why, Superversives and the Pulp Rev and others stand head and shoulders, quality wise, above any of the writers that the mainstream can bring against us, unless it's a genius like China Mieville or somebody who just like captures the consciousness in just the right way, like Neil Gaiman, who is otherwise pretty just okay, in my opinion. His short stories are always
Yes.
fantastic. Like he has a short story about this woman who buys the Holy Grail from a thrift shop, and a knight fixes her house while trying, to earn it. Like it's like you don't think much of it, but that was actually a pretty fantastic story. And it's goes on and on and on, and um, these things that we can attach meaning to, we can discuss in detail, and we've discussed the ending of Stone Ocean many times on this stream. Like pretty much any time me and Anthony get together, we talk about how good it is, because it's a similar instance of us agreeing that even though we have different
Yes.
reasons for it, it is an absolutely sublime moment. It is like watching a Rocky, walk on clouds. Just better and better.
That one other reason too, specifically that scene, because I think it annoys both of us that Stone Ocean doesn't get the respect it deserves.
I'm I'm actually apathetic towards that. I don't care.
I don't. It bothers me in the sense when I see all of the JoJo streamers, which honestly I've never been. There are some good Anitubers, but I've never been impressed with any of the specific JoJo streamers. They're all pretty blasé.
Yeah.
There are good individual videos by some of them. Like, I don't remember who it was, but the guy who had the massive theory about Part
Aeon
8.
Star.
Yeah.
Jolien's
I think
coronation
he's.
theory.
Yes. I actually think generally, because I've tried to listen to his other stuff since that video impressed me, and he was actually disappointingly pedestrian.
I thought he was better than most. But then again,
Sure, but with a low. How about this? He was, but with a low bar.
but the bar is there, and the bar is low. I think we set our own bar far too high. But that's a discussion for another day.
His coronation video was legitimately fantastic, so I will give him nothing but credit for that.
Mm-hmm. Anthony, it's always a pleasure to have you on the stream with me. I'm probably going to try and get Brian Niemeyer to join us next week, and we will see if he's available.
Sure. In that case, then, I really need to make sure that I read at least one of his books.
I mean, Combat Frame Exceed is a pretty good book. Like, it's legitimately good. Like, it's
I'll try that one then.
All right. Well, have a good one, Anthony. And thank you all
later.
for
Yep. See you in a few minutes on the Superversive Discord.
Probably. Thank you all, guys, for watching our streams. I appreciate each and every one of you. You're my audience, and I love you dearly. Have a good one.
Oh, this Ben guy.